Darsagal wasn't just a hotel. It was a fortress disguised as diplomacy. Its white marble walls gleamed with manufactured trust, its central fountain shaped like two hands clasping, a symbol of unity that would soon fracture. 14 heads of state descended on La Santo under the glare of global tension and pressurized peace talks, each of them armored in tailored suits and guarded smiles. But Ibrahim Traoré arrived differently. No grand entrance, no military parade, just 3 aides, 2 guards, and a man named Dio, his chief of intelligence, steel-eyed, gloved, and silent. From the moment they stepped into the summit chamber, something felt off. The room was circular, meant to feel equal. But equality had been rearranged. The seating plan, a detail most would miss, had been tampered with. Traoré's chair, originally, placed beside the president of Guinea-Bissau, was now between 2 ministers he hadn't spoken to in months. Subtle, deliberate, wrong. And then, there was the water. Every seat had 2 pre-filled glasses. The condensation on each was identical. But Traoré noticed something else. His left glass was 8 millimeters fuller. 8. Not an accident. Not a courtesy. A signal. He leaned toward Dio, his voice barely a breath. "Do you see it?" Dio scanned the table with trained precision, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "It's in the rhythm," he said. "Something's out of tune." The summit opened with diplomatic overtures, grand words of unity, and ceremonial handshakes. But Traoré's eyes never left the table. He wasn't listening to speeches. He was watching patterns. The glasses, the seating, the body language. The leaders smiled, but their eyes were sharp. Some flickered too quickly. Others lingered too long. All of it was noise trying to mask a deeper intention. He didn't need confirmation. He knew. Someone had planted a message disguised in courtesy, dressed in ritual. When you live long enough at the intersection of power and betrayal, you start to feel the tremors before the quake. Traoré had felt it days ago. He hadn't come to Darsagal to shake hands. He had come prepared to read between the gestures, to drink nothing he didn't pour himself, and to wait, quietly, for someone else to blink first. That glass of water was never just hydration. It was theater, a ritual, and someone had rewritten his role without telling him. But the mistake wasn't theirs for trying. The mistake was thinking he wouldn't notice. There are moments in power when silence is the sharpest blade, when a simple gesture can split a room in 2. As the Ivorian envoy droned on in practiced optimism about cross-border cooperation, Traoré didn't blink. His hand drifted toward the right glass, the safer one, but paused, hovering just above it. Instead, with a calculated detour, he turned to the man seated beside him, Minister Diallo from Niger. His tone was casual, almost amused. "Tell me, Minister," he said, his voice just above a whisper. "How's the water here? To your liking?" Diallo blinked. The question shouldn't have meant anything. But it did, because in a room where protocol was everything, deviation was deadly. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled too fast, too wide, and raised his own glass. "Very refreshing," he said, then took a long, deliberate sip. The next 2 minutes felt like an hour. At first, nothing. Then a cough. Then 2. Diallo reached for his collar, adjusting. His face lost color. Words began to slur. Chairs scraped. Someone called for medical assistance. Diallo collapsed sideways in his chair, eyes unfocused, his body jerking as panic swept through the room in a silent wave, but not from Traoré. He sat still, cold, focused, watching, because this wasn't panic. It was confirmation. The cameras shut off, doors locked, aides froze mid-step. The official explanation murmured across the room. Heat stroke. But the look shared said otherwise, and still Traoré remained seated. He hadn't meant for Diallo to drink it, but that was the genius of the move. It exposed what needed exposing. The poison wasn't meant to kill at random. It was a message, a warning, a test. The glass had been placed deliberately, filled with just enough metabolic interference to incapacitate, not assassinate, just enough to cause a scene, to shake the floor beneath Traoré without leaving blood on anyone's hands. The goal wasn't death. The goal was instability. Someone thought they were being clever. Someone thought he would drink it and stumble. But now they were the ones shaken. Traoré's calm demeanor was more lethal than any outburst. His fingers remained laced before him on the polished table as security swarmed around Diallo. His mind wasn't on the convulsing minister. It was on the ripple of reaction. Who twitched? Who avoided eye contact? Who seemed too calm? Because this wasn't a failed attack, this was a doorway opening, and behind it waited a deeper betrayal. The summit, for all its grandeur and gold-plated niceties, had just become something else. A crime scene, a performance. And the audience didn't even know what act they were in. When the medics wheeled Diallo away under the convenient explanation of fatigue, the remaining delegates stiffened in their seats. Their eyes said what their mouths dared not. Am I next? That was the moment Traoré had been waiting for. Not the poisoning, not the collapse. The fear, because fear rewrites alliances, it reshuffles power, it uncloaks intentions. And as the room shifted into a quieter, colder posture, Traoré began scanning the absence. Not what people said, what they didn't. The glances that didn't happen. The breath held too long. The delegate who hadn't touched his glass since the chaos began. The aide who whispered into no one's ear but still seemed to be reporting. Every clue was valuable now, every silence louder than a scream. And as the diplomatic summit moved on in strained civility, Traoré decided something quietly in his mind. The real game wouldn't be played in that room. It would be played in shadows. And it would begin with the three men who had entered the summit with him, the ones he trusted most or thought he did. Minutes after the medics wheeled Diallo out, Ibrahim Traoré rose without a word. No nod, no glance. Just a slow, calculated step away from the table, followed closely by Dio and Utara. Kosi lagged a breath behind. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Their polished shoes clicked against the marble as they moved down the corridor to the secure diplomatic suite. Once inside, Traoré turned and locked the doors himself. The click of the deadbolt echoed louder than any accusation. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He faced the three men who had seen him at his most vulnerable, who handled his schedule, filtered his intelligence, arranged his meals. Dio, the seasoned shadow. Utara, the disciplined guardian. Kosi, the prodigy who never looked directly into the sun but always knew its angle. Traoré placed both untouched water glasses from the summit table onto the suite's desk. Which one of you knew before I did? His voice was low, measured, not angry. Something worse. The silence stretched. Dio stepped forward. Calm. Almost rehearsed. Sir, he said, I noticed a deviation in the seating arrangement, a minor anomaly. I didn't act because I had no confirmation of threat. Only rhythm. He paused, but Traoré said nothing. Utara followed. More defensive. The catering was cleared. Water sealed, staff vetted. If something slipped through, it came after delivery. Or, he hesitated, we were outmaneuvered. Still, Traoré remained silent, but Kosi didn't speak at all. He looked down, not at the glasses, not at Traoré, but at the carpet. And that was the tell. Not data, not evidence. Traoré whispered. Behavior. He moved to a small side table, opened a sealed bottle, poured 3 identical glasses of water, and placed them before each man. Drink. Dio didn't hesitate. He drank. Utara sniffed, then followed. Kosi reached, but not for the glass Traoré had just poured. He reached for one of the glasses from the summit. Wrong move. You're too smart to be that stupid, Kosi. The room dropped 5 degrees. Kosi froze, hands suspended midair. Who gave you the vial? His lips trembled. No denial, no deflection. And then Dio stepped forward again, this time holding a folded piece of paper, a ciphered signal. Arrived at 7:46 a.m., triangulated to a burner 2 floors below. coded signature matched 3 known users. Kasi was one. He unfolded it, revealing lines of data, timestamps, encrypted bursts. Utara added. There was a diplomatic pouch. Arrived at 3:14 a.m., not on manifest, tagged as medical cargo. 2 vials, Dio said. Only one recovered. Kasi looked up finally. Eyes glossy. It wasn't meant to kill. They said it would just disorient. Shake your position. Trigger early. Elections. Traoré finished for him. Weaken the narrative, not the man. He turned and walked to his briefcase. A black leather case, locked with a biometric seal. Inside, a file marked in his own hand. Continuum disruption. He laid out 3 items. A satellite photo of a shuttered oil terminal off Sierra Leone's coast. A floor plan of Lisanto's kitchen and loading bay. A photo of a man, once a foreign, military advisor, now a press attaché to one of the delegations. You thought the poison was the story, Traoré said. It was just the curtain. The play was always about the narrative. A paranoid leader, a compromised summit, a staged medical emergency, all feeding into a press cycle already seeded. They weren't trying to destroy him. They were trying to discredit him, but they made one mistake. They left him breathing. And now, he was done watching. That evening, the summit resumed. Not because the storm had passed, but because the optics demanded calm. Cameras returned, curtains redrawn. Delegates once again filed into the grand banquet hall of Lisanto, dressed in diplomacy. But something had changed, not in posture, not in words, but in the undercurrent that rippled beneath every glance, every toast, every fork placed on linen. And then he walked in. Ibrahim Traoré did not wear a Western suit that night. He wore memory. An indigo, robe with moss-threaded embroidery, woven by hand, worn only in ceremony. His grandfather's weave, once used in harvest rituals, now reborn in a hall full of predators. At his side was Dio, silent, sharp, and unblinking. No aids, no armor, just legacy. And in Traoré's hand, not a wineglass like the others, but a carved wooden cup, bronze-wrapped, centuries old. A declaration before a word was spoken. The room stilled when he entered. Delegates tracked his every step, subtle but synchronized, as though measuring his pace for signs of weakness. He gave them none. His seat had been moved. Again. This time, slightly off camera, just outside the main media angle, an intentional shift by someone hoping to frame him out of history. He said nothing about it. Sat down. Let them think they'd succeeded. Let them think he was fading. The toast was set to begin. A summit tradition. Crystal flutes filled with red vintage from southern France. The toastmaster, palms damp, rose to his feet. May peace feed. Our people faster than profit feeds our fear. But Traoré stood first, cutting the air with calm defiance. He didn't raise the glass. He raised his voice. Before we toast, he said, I must ask, how many of you know the story of Sanfi the twice saved? Silence. Not ignorance. Fear. Because Sanfi was not in any official history. Sanfi lived in firelight stories, told by old women in villages too. Small to be mapped. Sanfi, the shepherd whose well was poisoned, once by raiders, once by friends. The first time he survived by chance, Traoré said. The second by memory. He had learned the taste of betrayal. He turned the wooden cup upside down, slowly, deliberately, and placed it flat on the table. Tonight, he said, I drink nothing, not from your bottles, not from your rituals, because peace must not be toasted in wine. It must be swallowed in truth. Forks stopped. Breath held. The room didn't erupt. It fractured. One delegate dropped a napkin. Another adjusted a tie that suddenly felt too tight. The cameras, and there were many, tilted subtly to frame the moment, because what they didn't know was this. A global live stream had already been activated, a neutral Ghanaian media node, a direct feed, and now the world was watching. Then it happened. The delegate from Sierra Leone stood, straightened his lapels, and walked out. 20 seconds later, 2 more followed. Dio, without blinking, tapped his cufflink. In 3 cities, files were released. Encrypted emails, phone logs, satellite imagery. The root of a diplomatic pouch mislabeled as medical aid. Proof. Proof of a plot. Proof the actor had never forgotten his lines. Proof the stage had been burned from underneath the audience. And through it all, Traoré never lifted a glass. He sat calmly, hands folded before him, and when he finally did sip, it was only from his own wooden cup. Water drawn from home, untouched, sacred, a symbol, a warning. To drink from another's glass is to accept their illusion. He chose memory instead. 3 days later, the summit had vanished from the front pages. Frankfurt's stock exchange had hiccuped. A celebrity in Lagos had imploded. Somewhere near the Red Sea, an earthquake stole headlines. But in Ouagadougou, something far quieter and far more permanent was unfolding. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, not in fear but in recognition, in anticipation. Atop the Ministry of Memory, an unmarked building, anonymous to most, Traoré stood barefoot. It wasn't a ministry of bureaucracy, but of stories. A place for the archiving of patterns, whispered names, tribal treaties, and songs too old for ink. In his hand was a single piece of parchment. Coarse, local, unsigned, no stamp, only a faded red spiral drawn in the corner, inside a single name, not a criminal charge, not a warrant, a signal. The name of the only delegate who hadn't flinched when the poisoned glass was exposed, who hadn't blinked during the ritual, whose stillness had been too perfect, too measured. The trade minister of a partner nation cloaked in aid, wrapped in conditional generosity. That name was handed to Dio with no further instruction, no anger, no decree, just trust. And trust is what moved next. 2 days later, the minister returned home. And almost instantly, every encrypted device in their office failed. Their interviews canceled, flights rerouted, accounts temporarily suspended due to technical realignment. Inside a locked drawer, their assistant found an envelope, the same parchment, the same spiral, but no name, just one sentence. We drank memory. That night, the minister resigned. No press conference, no reason offered. Officially, personal exhaustion, but those closest knew. And in Burkina Faso, there was no statement, no medal, no broadcast, because this victory wasn't for applause, it was for alignment, and alignment is quiet. In the days that followed, Traoré was seen walking barefoot through remote villages, speaking not with cameras but with blacksmiths and midwives, griots and farmers. His story passed not through microphones but through firelight. They would say, he walked into a banquet of wolves and made the wolves doubt their own teeth, and on the 7th day, Traoré returned to the fountain outside Le Santo, the same basin shaped like clasped hands. But this time, he carried a gourd of water drawn from his homeland. He poured it slowly into the basin. No audience, no lens, just silence. The marble rippled once, as if the stones themselves had exhaled, and he whispered, "The well has been cleaned." That night, embassies across the region adjusted their postures. Agreements were reread, cables rewritten. Somewhere, in a distant boardroom, a new phrase entered diplomatic vocabulary: drink your own glass. Because now they knew. Traoré was not just a president, he was a pattern reader, a betrayal student, a man who trusted only the taste of truth. And those who plotted would face a choice: empty their own cups, or watch the spiral come for them next. If this tale struck a chord, subscribe and share. The next chapter is already unfolding. Because in this world, the sharpest weapon isn't a bullet and it's memory. Stay with us. The spiral always returns.